At my brother's graduation dinner, my dad raised his glass and said, "He's the son we're proud to claim, not the one still chasing fantasies." Everyone laughed. Then the dean shook my hand and asked, "Why didn't you tell them the new building carries your name?" My father went white, and nobody laughed again. All right, listen up real quick. I want to keep this channel going and I need your help with that. If you enjoy these stories, subscribe. That's it, one tap. And you're part of this thing we're building here. It means more than you think. Okay, now let's jump into today's story. A man walked into the private dining room at 7:49 p.m. Gray suit. Silver watch. He smelled faintly of rain from the parking lot, and one of his sleeves had a small dark spot where water had hit him before he made it inside. He didn't announce himself. The hostess had directed him, and he walked in the way men walk when they know the room they're looking for and don't need anyone's help finding it. He scanned the table. 12 faces on the near side, 18 on the far. He found me near the window, seat 11, and walked around the long edge of the table until he was standing behind my chair. His shoe scraped once on the hardwood. I heard it. My father was still smiling from the toast he'd given 8 minutes earlier. My mother was refilling a water glass that didn't need refilling. My brother was telling a story about his graduation ceremony. His fiancée was laughing in the polite, tired way people laugh at stories they've already heard twice that week. None of them noticed the man in the gray suit until he said my name. "Daniel, sorry I'm late." 11 days earlier. It's a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and a folder of property inspection reports when my mother called. I watched the phone vibrate twice before I answered. "Daniel." "Hi, Mom." "Saturday night, Marchetti's, your brother's graduation. We expect you to be there at 7. "Okay. Wear something appropriate. Not that gray thing you wore to the Easter dinner. Your brother worked hard for this one." I heard the clink of something metal on the other end. A pan or a spoon. She was cooking. The call was a reminder on her list between chopping onions and checking on whatever was in the oven. "I have a suit," I said. "The navy one. Wear the navy one. Your father will want you to look presentable. There will be people there we haven't met." "Who?" "Anna's parents, 2 of your father's oldest colleagues. Andrew, and of course, some of the family. 30 people total." "Okay. Don't be late, Daniel, please." She hung up before I could say anything else. I set the phone face down on the folder of inspection reports. The tea had gone cold. I hadn't noticed. I drank it anyway. There's a particular tone my mother uses on the phone with me. It's not cold, it's administrative. The same tone she uses with contractors and dentists. It took me a long time to recognize it for what it was. She doesn't use it with my brother. She never has. I finished the tea and went back to the reports. An inspection on a commercial building in the warehouse district. A furnace issue on a property I'd been managing for 5 years. The pages were methodical and the reports were clear. I liked the work. I'd liked it for a decade. My mother had never asked me a single specific question about any of it. I didn't think about the dinner for the rest of the day. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would be. 10 years ago, I told my father I was going to work in property management. Not as an employee, as an owner. I was 27. He listened for about 2 minutes. Then he said, "Property management. Daniel, that's a rental company. Rental companies go out of business when people stop paying rent, which is most of them. It's a little more than that. A little more than that." "Okay." He went back to his newspaper. That was the end of the conversation. That Wednesday evening, 11 days before the dinner, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I drafted a short email and read it twice before sending. "Dean Reyes. I'll be at Marchetti's on Saturday the 19th for a family dinner. If you're in town for the graduation ceremony and have time that evening, I'd be glad to see you briefly. 7:45 works for me. Best, Daniel." I hit send. Closed the laptop. The apartment was quiet. I made dinner for myself. Ate at the counter. The email sat in my sent folder. I didn't reread it. I didn't need to. Friday morning. 10:14 a.m. The phone rang. Dean Harold Reyes. "Daniel." "Harold. I got your email on Thursday. I'll be in town for the ceremony Saturday afternoon. A brief meeting at 7:45 works well." Thank you, sir. And I wanted to mention, the board approved the next phase on Monday. They'd like to schedule the formal dedication in the fall. I'll bring some materials Saturday. We can review. I appreciate it. Private room at Marchetti's, yes? Yes. I just asked for the Reeves party. Understood? I'll see you Saturday. I thanked him. Hung up. The phone sat on the counter. I went back to the inspection reports. Saturday, 6:52 p.m. I parked 2 blocks from Marchetti's and walked. The evening was cool and the sidewalk still held a faint damp from a rain that had passed through around 5. I could smell it. Asphalt and earth. The smell that cities get when spring isn't finished yet. The maitre d' greeted me at the door. Reeves party? Yes. Private room, right this way. He led me down a short corridor. The private room had double glass doors. Through them I could already see my father standing near the head of the table, holding a glass, gesturing to one of his colleagues. My mother was straightening something on the table. My brother was sitting with Anna, who was smiling politely at whatever story Andrew, my father's oldest friend, was finishing. I walked in. My mother saw me first. Daniel, you're here. Hi, Mom. She put her hand on my arm for 2 seconds and moved on to the next task, which was correcting the placement of the breadbasket. My father nodded at me from across the room and went back to his conversation. Andrew raised his glass in a small hello. My brother said, Hey, Dan, glad you made it. Congratulations, Andrew, I said. Andrew? My brother laughed. I'm Michael. Andrew's over there. Sorry. Congratulations, Michael. No worries. Long week? Something like that. It wasn't actually a long week. I'd said his own name instead of his out of the kind of mental slip that happens when you walk into a room and your nervous system is already doing math on who's present and where you're supposed to sit. I filed the mistake without explaining it. Anna stood up and offered her hand. Daniel, I'm Anna. It's good to finally meet you. You too. Her handshake was firm. She held eye contact a beat longer than most people do. She sat back down. My brother put his arm around the back of her chair. I found seat 11, near the window, between my Aunt Margaret and Anna's father, a retired accountant whose name turned out to be Robert. I sat down. Robert introduced himself. We shook hands across the table. The water glasses were full. The breadbasket was half eaten. My father tapped his glass with a fork, and the room settled into polite attention. The first course came out at 7:10. Scallops for most, a vegetable plate for the 2 vegetarians at the far end. My father sat at the head, where he always sits, and held court the way he always does. He asked Robert and Caroline about the drive-in from Connecticut. He complimented the restaurant's wine list. He told a short story about Michael's first week of college that I'd heard 7 times before. My mother laughed at the right moment. My aunt smiled. Anna ate her scallops and glanced at the room every few seconds, in a way I recognized from meetings. The glance of a person reading the room's dynamics before speaking. She hadn't fully decided yet what kind of family she was marrying into. She was collecting data. Caroline, her mother, did the same thing but less skillfully. She laughed a beat behind the rest of the table at the punchline about Michael's dorm roommate. Robert, next to me, asked what kind of work I did. I said property management. He asked how long. I said 10 years. He nodded. Asked if I owned any of the buildings. I said some. He asked how many. I said a few. A few is a vague number, he said. It is. He smiled. Didn't push. He was a retired accountant. He knew when a number was being deliberately vague, and he knew when to let it be vague. A few minutes later, when the conversation had moved on, he leaned over and said quietly, My firm used to do the books for a couple of smaller property companies in the city. One of them had your last name on the invoices. I didn't make the connection when your mother told us your name. Small world? Small enough. He went back to his wine. Didn't tell the table. Didn't mention it again the rest of the evening. At 7:23, my father turned his attention to me for the first time. His eyes moved across the table until they landed on my face. Daniel, how's work? Working on some things. He nodded once, took a sip of wine. His eyes were already sliding toward Robert before I finished the sentence. Robert, What year did you retire? I keep meaning to ask. The whole exchange took 6 seconds. My mother didn't look at me during it. My brother was telling Anna something. Andrew was inspecting the wine list. Anna, across the table, watched the 6 seconds in full. Her eyes met mine for a half second when my father turned away. She didn't smile, she just registered it. Robert, next to me, had also seen it. He didn't say anything. He simply looked at his water glass and then looked at me with a small, neutral nod that was neither approval nor pity, just acknowledgement. I drank my water. The second course came out. The conversation moved on. Anna, for the rest of the first course, did not speak unless someone spoke to her directly. She watched the table the way people watch a game whose rules they've just started to understand. At 7:41, my father stood up. He tapped his glass 3 times with a butter knife. The small metallic sound carried across the table, and the conversations faded in the order that conversations fade when a toast is coming. First the loud ones, then the quiet ones, then a polite settling silence that belonged entirely to my father. He held his glass at chest level. Not too high, not too low. I'm the height of a man who had given this kind of toast before. He glanced at my mother, who already had her hand near her water glass to tap if the moment called for it. He glanced at Andrew, who was sitting back in his chair with the expression of a man about to enjoy something. He glanced at the far end of the table. He glanced everywhere but me. Friends, family. A few new faces I'm honored to welcome tonight. He smiled at Robert and Caroline. They smiled back. Tonight is about Michael, my youngest, who today graduated from a program I don't fully understand but apparently did so with distinction. Small laughter. My brother grinned and leaned into Anna. Some of you have watched Michael grow up, seen him struggle, seen him figure it out, seen him become the kind of man who builds things that last. A career, a future, a life he's proud of, a partnership. He raised his glass toward Anna. We couldn't be more welcoming, Anna. We mean that. Anna nodded. A small, careful smile. She was a lawyer. She'd practiced this smile in deposition rooms. And so tonight, I want to raise a glass to the son we're proud to claim. He paused. The pause was a beat longer than it needed to be, and I watched it happen. The pause was the point. He was holding the air for what was coming. Not the one still chasing fantasies. He smiled as he said it, the smile of a man delivering a line he'd been rehearsing. Andrew laughed first. Loud. A big, from-the-belly laugh, the kind that gives the room permission to laugh with him. His laugh bounced off the walls of the private dining room, and it was the loudest thing that had happened all evening. My mother laughed with her hand near her mouth, embarrassed and amused at once. Michael laughed and shook his head and said, "Dad," the way you say dad, when you're pretending to be embarrassed but aren't. Anna's laugh was polite and brief, and ended a full second before anyone else's. Aunt Margaret didn't laugh. Robert and Caroline laughed the polite laugh of guests who don't know what they're laughing at and are trying to match the room. My jaw tightened during Andrew's laugh. I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth until the pressure faded. Then I lifted my glass with the rest of the table, touched it to Aunt Margaret's, drank a small amount, and set it down at the same angle it had been at before. Anna was watching me by the end of the toast. She wasn't laughing either. "To Michael," my father said. To Michael." The room clinked. My father sat down. Andrew clapped him on the shoulder. "Beautiful, James. Beautiful." My father smiled at Andrew, nodded once, did not look at me. The third course came out at 7:44. Duck for most. A fish substitute for Anna's mother. The conversation resumed in fragments. My father accepted compliments the way he accepts everything, with small nods and a slightly lowered voice that implied modesty he didn't feel. Andrew said, "James, you've still got it. 40 years and you've still got it." "A father's toast isn't supposed to be memorable," my father said. "A father's toast is supposed to be true." He said it without looking at me. Nobody at the table looked at me, except Anna once for a full second, before she returned to cutting her fish. Her eyes lingered on mine a beat longer than a casual glance. Oh, a lawyer's beat. a beat designed to note something for later use. My brother said something quietly to Anna. She nodded. He reached for his wine and didn't drink from it. He set it back down in exactly the spot he'd picked it up from. There was something small happening in the way he was moving. Not regret. Recognition. He had laughed at the toast without meaning to, or without meaning it as much as he'd shown, and some small portion of him was reviewing the laugh in real time. Aunt Margaret to my right didn't speak. She didn't eat much either. She moved food around her plate in a pattern that suggested she was thinking about something far away. She had grown up with my father. They were siblings. She knew him in a way nobody else at the table did. She was the only person besides me who hadn't laughed at the toast. I ate a bite of duck. He drank water. The windows on my side of the room faced the street. A car passed slowly, headlights sweeping through the glass. My father laughed at something Robert said. My mother refilled a water glass. Michael and Anna had a quiet conversation too low to hear. At one point, Anna looked toward the glass doors of the private room, as if checking the time on a clock that wasn't there. The waiter came back with a fresh bottle of wine. My father nodded at him. The waiter uncorked it at the table, made the small ceremony of the first pour for my father to approve. My father approved it. The waiter moved around the table filling glasses. When he reached me, I shook my head. I still had the same glass from the toast, half full. He moved on. At 7:47, my mother said something about the restaurant's owner, whom she'd apparently met at a charity event. At 7:48, Andrew told a joke I missed but the table laughed at. The laugh was smaller than the one after the toast, more polite, normalcy trying to reassert itself. At 7:49, the door of the private room opened. The man in the gray suit walked in. He didn't hesitate. He scanned the table, found me, and walked the long way around. Daniel, sorry I'm late. The cab took the wrong highway. I stood. Harold, thank you for coming. Of course. The conversation at the table did not fully stop. My father glanced over. Saw a stranger. Went back to his sentence with Robert. My mother glanced over. Registered. Waited to see if she needed to greet. Harold shook my hand. I won't interrupt your dinner long. I brought the materials you mentioned. But we can schedule a proper meeting for Monday if that's better. Monday is fine, I said. This is my family. My father, James. My mother, Elaine. My brother, Michael. Michael's fiancée, Anna. My Aunt Margaret. My father's friend, Andrew. Harold nodded at each. Pleasure. My father extended his hand across the table. James Reeves. Harold Reyes, Dean of the Business School. Harold's handshake was professional. Congratulations on your son's graduation today. Strong program. Strong cohort this year. Thank you. Harold turned back to me. I wanted to ask one quick thing about the dedication in the fall. The board is finalizing the format. Of course. Why didn't you tell them the new building carries your name? Harold smiled as he said it. He was making a small joke, a professional courtesy. He thought he was saying a light thing in front of proud family members. The sentence landed in the room the way a dropped plate lands. Clean break. No ambiguity. My father's face did something I'd never seen it do. The color moved out of his cheeks in a single movement, like a tide pulling back. He didn't speak. His hand was still half raised from the handshake, and it stayed there for a beat too long before he slowly lowered it to the tablecloth. Andrew was mid-laugh when Harold spoke. The sound stopped in his throat like someone had put a hand over his mouth. His smile stayed partly formed. His eyes moved from my father to me to my father again. He lowered his glass to the table and did not pick it up again for the rest of the evening. Anna's face moved first, of all of them. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then narrowed. She looked at me, then at my father, then at Michael, who hadn't caught up yet. Her expression settled into something focused. Not shock, comprehension. A lawyer's face when the argument turns. Michael said, "What?" My mother said, "I'm sorry, I don't think I heard you." Harold, still smiling politely, said, "The Reeves Hall, the new building. I assumed you would have celebrated it by now." He paused. The smile faltered for the first time. My father wasn't speaking. My mother had her hand at her throat. Andrew wasn't looking at anyone. Anna's parents had gone completely still at the other end of the table. Only Aunt Margaret was moving, and her movement was a single slow nod at her plate. Robert, Anna's father, cleared his throat once and then didn't follow it with anything. My brother's wine glass was halfway to his mouth when Harold had said the words. It was still there, halfway for a beat. Then Michael set it down. Didn't pick it up again. Harold registered the room fully for the first time. I'm sorry, did I speak out of turn? Nobody answered him. Robert cleared his throat and looked at the ceiling. Caroline put her fork down on her plate. The hum of the restaurant outside the private room suddenly seemed louder, the clatter of another table's dessert course leaking through the glass doors. My father finally spoke. His voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand. Harold looked at me, then back at my father. A small, uncertain smile. The smile of a man who had walked into a situation he didn't yet have the full shape of. I assumed Daniel had mentioned it. The capital campaign. The donation. The building is being named in the fall. The board approved the final format on Monday. He looked at me again. I reached for my water glass slowly, took a sip, set it back down. The sound of the glass meeting the tablecloth was the only sound in the room for a long second. I'm sorry, did I speak out of turn? He said again. Harold, I said. It's fine. Monday is fine. Let's talk then. Of course, Daniel, I apologize. I'll see myself out. He shook my hand again. Brief, professional. Walked out. The door clicked shut. The click was the loudest sound in the room. The fourth course came out at 7:58. Nobody had finished the third. The waiters moved in and out with the practiced quiet of a staff that had been trained to read a room. They had read ours. They weren't asking if anyone wanted anything. They were placing plates and retreating. My father sat down slowly. He placed his hands flat on the tablecloth and looked at a specific spot on the wood grain of the table. My mother tried to make small talk with Caroline about the wine. Caroline answered in short sentences and didn't ask follow-up questions. Robert looked at his plate for a long time, and when he finally looked up, it was at Anna. He was looking for guidance from his daughter about what to do next. Anna didn't give him any. Michael cleared his throat. So, he stopped. Didn't continue. He stared at his water glass, moved his napkin from his lap to the table and back to his lap. Anna reached across the table and briefly touched my forearm. Daniel? She didn't finish the sentence either. Her touch lasted maybe 2 seconds, and then she pulled her hand back and picked up her water. Andrew hadn't spoken since Harold had walked out. His plate was untouched. He sat very still, as if movement might draw attention to him. I'd known Andrew my whole life. I had never seen him sit still at a dinner. He was a man who used his hands when he talked, who always had a glass in his hand, who always leaned forward when someone else was speaking. Tonight he was leaning back. His hands were in his lap. His glass was empty and he was not refilling it. At one point he caught my eye across the table. He held the look for about 2 seconds. He didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He just looked. Then he looked down at the tablecloth and didn't look at me again for the rest of the evening. The waiters came and went. The 5th course was served. My father ate nothing. My mother ate very little. Michael ate methodically, the way you chew when you can't taste anything. Aunt Margaret, surprisingly, ate her entire course. She was a practical woman. If food had been ordered, she was going to eat it. The conversation at our table died entirely for long stretches. I could hear conversations from the rest of the restaurant through the glass doors. Laughter, somewhere. A birthday song, distant. The sounds of a normal Saturday evening happening to other people. My father tried once to start a new conversation. So, Robert, you were telling me about your boat. Robert looked up. Yes, it's a small one. Lake, not ocean. Where do you keep it? We have a house up on the lake. The boat stays there. Nice. The conversation went no further. My father went back to looking at the wood grain of the table. At 8:47, the desserts arrived. I declined mine. At 8:52, the check came. My father reached for it automatically. My mother put her hand on his wrist and took it herself. She paid with her card. Her hand shook slightly when she signed the receipt. At 9:04, people stood. I walked over to my mother. "Thank you for the dinner." She looked at me. Her eyes were full, but she wasn't crying. "Daniel." "Good night, Mom." My father was still sitting in his chair, looking at the tablecloth. I walked past him on my way to Michael and Anna without turning my head. Michael didn't meet my eyes. Anna did. I shook Andrew's hand. He shook mine back, firmly, and held it a second longer than necessary. He didn't say anything. I walked out. The maitre d' opened the door for me on the way out. "Have a good evening, Mr. Reeves." "You too." In the parking lot, the rain had started again. A light, thin rain. The sidewalk was wet. The air smelled clean. I drove home without the radio. At a red light near my building, I watched a man walk his dog across the intersection. The dog stopped to sniff something near the curb. The man waited. The light turned green before they finished. The man tugged gently on the leash and they crossed. I pulled into my parking space, sat in the car for a minute, then went inside. Sunday, 11:42 a.m. I was washing dishes when my phone rang. "Anna." "Daniel, I hope this isn't a bad time." "It's fine. Can I ask you a few questions?" "Yes." "How long has the building been under construction?" 3 years. The capital campaign has been going for 6. "And the donation?" "The donation was finalized 8 months ago, or the naming rights were confirmed at a board meeting last November." "Dean Reyes." "I've known him for 4 years. He's been the point of contact from the beginning." She paused. I could hear her taking notes. Anna is a lawyer. She takes notes when she's thinking. I could also hear, very faintly, what sounded like a coffee maker running in the background. "Daniel, one more question. Do my parents know about the business school?" "Harold mentioned it last night in front of your parents." "I know. I'm asking what my parents know about you." "Whatever your brother told them," which I assume is whatever my father told him. "Okay," a pause. "I'm going to be honest with them about who you are and what you do. I hope that's all right." "Thank you. I also want to say I'm sorry about last night. The toast was cruel. I knew it was when he said it." "I know. Were you surprised?" "No. I'm sorry about that too." "Thank you, Anna." There was a short pause. She was deciding whether to say something else. "Daniel." He rehearsed the toast. I heard him in the hallway before dinner. He was muttering it to himself. I thought he was practicing a welcome toast for my parents. Then he delivered it, and I understood what he'd actually been practicing. "Thank you for telling me." "You're welcome. I thought you should know." The call ended. I finished the dishes, dried them, put them away. The kitchen was quiet in the specific way it gets on Sunday mornings when nothing urgent is happening. Sunday, 2:30 p.m. My mother called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Daniel." "Mom." "Your father is devastated. He didn't know. He had no idea. If he'd known, he would never have said any of that." "Okay." "He'd had wine before the toast. You know how he gets. It was a joke, a poorly judged joke, not malicious. He rehearsed it." The line went quiet. "What?" "He rehearsed it." "How do you know that?" I didn't answer. The silence lasted 8 seconds. I could hear her breathing. "Anna told you?" "Yes." "Daniel." "Mom, I have to go." "Your father wants to talk to you. He's been trying all morning. He called the university this morning. He hasn't come out of his office since. He wants to talk to you." "I'll call him in a few days." "Daniel." "Good night, Mom." I hung up. The phone sat in my hand. I set it on the counter face down. Monday morning, 8:11 a.m. Aunt Margaret called. "Daniel." "Hi," or Aunt Marge. "I've known for a long time." "I thought so. I saw a piece about you in a newsletter 3 years ago, then another one last year. I mentioned it to your mother once. She said, 'That's probably a different Reeves.' I didn't push. I'm sorry I didn't push. I should have." I sat with it for 3 years and I didn't push. That's going to bother me for a while. I understand why. Your mother asked me yesterday if I'd seen anything about your work. She was hoping I'd say no. I told her what I'd seen. Thank you for that. Daniel. Yes? I wasn't going to say anything about your father. I wasn't going to take sides. But I want you to know that I nodded last night. When the dean said it, I nodded. I don't know if you saw me. I saw you. Good. We were both quiet for a moment. Come by for tea sometime, she said. I will. We hung up. I made coffee. The day started. Monday evening. My brother texted. I didn't know, man. Dad never said anything. I feel like an idiot. I read it. Set the phone down. Didn't reply. Wednesday afternoon, another text. I laughed. I'm sorry about that. I can't stop thinking about it. Anna told me I looked like I was enjoying it. I was. That's what bothers me. I enjoyed laughing at you. I read it twice. Didn't reply. Friday, a third text. I'm not asking you to forgive anything. I just want to say I saw you. That night and all the nights before. I pretended I didn't. I'm sorry for every one of them. I read it. Put the phone down. Didn't reply to that one either. But I kept the text on my screen for a while before I let the phone lock. Andrew, my father's oldest friend. I dropped out of my father's life over the following month. Not dramatically. He just stopped. My mother mentioned it once to Aunt Margaret, who mentioned it to me. Andrew had canceled a standing Thursday lunch they'd had for 15 years. When my father called to reschedule, Andrew said he was busy. When my father called again the following week, Andrew said he was still busy. They haven't had lunch since the dinner. My father has not figured out how to ask why. My father hadn't called me directly. Not once. By the end of the first week, his total communication to me since the dinner consisted of 0 texts, 0 calls, and whatever quiet verification he'd done on Sunday morning, calling the university to confirm that what the dean had said was true. He'd verified. He hadn't reached out. Mom, the verification and the silence were the same gesture. He was a man who had built his life on the economy of his approval. He decided who at the dinner table received a nod and who didn't. He decided which son was mentioned at his office and which one wasn't. Approval was his currency. He had spent it on my brother for 20 years and withheld it from me for almost as long. The silence after the dinner was the same economy, in reverse. He couldn't spend his approval on me now without admitting that he had spent it wrongly for a decade. So he didn't spend it at all. I understood. I wasn't waiting. Anna and I had coffee the following Saturday. She'd spent the week telling her parents what I actually did. Her parents had called Michael to clarify. Michael had called my father to ask the same questions. My father had told Michael to ask me. Mom, Michael hadn't asked me. The information moved through the family like water finding its level, but it always stopped when it got close to me. Nobody could bring themselves to come directly. The directness would have required them to acknowledge everything they had not bothered to ask for a decade. The handwritten letter from my father arrived on a Tuesday, 2.5 weeks after the dinner. 4 pages. I recognized his handwriting through the envelope. Blue ink. His careful, upright letters. I put the envelope in a drawer and closed the drawer. Didn't open it for months. The drawer was where I kept things I hadn't decided about. A few old photographs. A watch that had stopped running 2 years ago. A birthday card from an uncle who died before I could write back. The letter went in next to the card. I closed the drawer with my foot while I was holding a coffee in one hand and a stack of mail in the other. It was Anna who told me, weeks later over a second coffee, what my father had done Sunday morning. She had it from my mother, who had it from my father directly. He called the university at 8:30 on a Sunday, Anna said. He asked for the dean's office. He got the answering service. He left a message with his name and a phone number and said he needed a call back about the Reeves Hall. And the dean called him back at 11:15. Your father asked a few questions. The dean answered them. Your father said thank you. But my mother said he didn't really say thank you. He said it the way people say it when their voice can't do anything else. I nodded. He asked the dean about the amount of the donation. The dean told him. But your father didn't say anything for a full minute. He just sat with the phone to his ear. The dean finally said, "Mr. Reeves, are you still there?" And your father said yes and asked if there was a dedication date. The dean told him, "Fall." Your father thanked him again, then hung up. And he didn't tell my mother about the call for 3 days. She found out because she checked his recent calls on his phone when he was in the shower. He hadn't deleted them. That was the part that surprised her, that he hadn't deleted them. I drank my coffee, didn't say anything. Daniel, I want you to know that my parents know everything now. They don't believe what your father said at the dinner. Not a word of it. Thank you. At the end of the academic year, in June, a plain envelope arrived at my office with Harold's handwriting on the front. Inside, a single sheet, 3 lines. Daniel, I hope my question at dinner didn't cause you more difficulty than it was worth. If I had known the family had not been informed, I would have called you privately first. Harold. I wrote back the same afternoon. Harold, you didn't cause difficulty. You made things accurate. That's the only thing that matters. Daniel. I dropped the envelope in the outgoing mail bin on the way to a meeting. 6 months after the dinner, November, a Thursday afternoon. Harold and I walked out of a meeting together across the business school's main quad. The trees had dropped most of their leaves. The grass was wet from a rain that had fallen an hour earlier. Our shoes made sound on the brick path. The sound was a small, clean rhythm, the rhythm of 2 men walking at a deliberate pace because neither of them was in a hurry and both of them were used to being outside. We passed in front of the new building. 3 stories. Limestone facade. Glass entry. Above the entry, mounted into the limestone at eye level for anyone pausing to look, a bronze plaque. Reeves Hall. Below the name, in smaller lettering, dedicated to the pursuit of building what lasts. I'd walked past the plaque 50 times since it had been installed. Never stopped. Neither did Harold. The plaque was not a ceremony to us. It was a fact. It had been designed, paid for, installed. It would outlast both of us. That was the point of it. We kept walking, Harold talking about a procedural matter with the next phase of the campaign, something about an audit schedule, and something about a board meeting in January. The words moved past me. I was thinking about nothing in particular. I was thinking about dinner, about whether it would rain before I got home, about a tenant in one of my buildings who had called the day before to ask about a lease renewal. He trailed off, cleared his throat. He'd done that 2 or 3 times in the last 10 minutes, the small cough of a man working up to something. Daniel, something I meant to mention. Yes? Your father came here last month? I slowed. He matched my pace without commenting on the change. He walked over from the parking garage, stood in front of the plaque for about a minute. I watched him from my office window. I didn't know if I should go down. I didn't. Did he come inside? No, he stood there. He read the plaque. He put his hand on the limestone, on just his palm. Not long. Then he turned around and walked back to the parking garage. He didn't look up at my office. I don't think he knew I could see him. I nodded. Did he tell anyone? Harold asked. No. I thought as much. We kept walking. The brick path led to the faculty lot. The rain hadn't returned, though the sky was preparing for it, the clouds heavy in the east. A student on a bicycle passed us going the other direction. A janitor was pushing a cart toward one of the older buildings. Normal campus life, continuing around a name in bronze that was attached to the man walking the path. Harold stopped at his car. We shook hands. He said he'd see me in January. I said the same. He got in his car and pulled out of the lot. I walked to my own car 2 rows over. The keys were in my pocket. The rain had started again, just barely. A thin, almost mist that made the bronze plaque on the side of the building look darker than it had a minute earlier. I unlocked the car and sat down in the driver's seat. I let the engine warm for a minute. Then I pulled out of the lot and drove home.